Welcome, guys, to episode 10 of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake KEARNAN, and joining me as always is the League Express editor, MARTYN SADLER. How you going, Martin?
I'm going fine, Jake, but probably not as good as you because you've just hot-footed it from Mallorca.
Yes.
To get here, you've jumped off the plane and you've come straight to Brighouse to make this podcast. So, A, you've got a medal for dedication, and B, I'm really jealous.
Oh, no, absolutely.
that you've been there.
Oh,
So
well, I mean...
You're looking very tanned as well, I should say.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad I didn't come back, red and sunburned. But, it was a great little trip away. I spent 7 days out at Mallorca. That was my first time actually being in Spain, and especially to that beautiful island. A lot of days spent on the beach, sunbaking, swimming, and
your
cliff
girlfriend
jumping.
loved it, presumably.
Oh yeah, she loved it. It's sort of very, very similar beaches to some of the beaches we have back in Queensland, but just how crystal clear the water is, absolutely amazing. But I couldn't help but get back as quick as I could because we've got the NRL Grand Final this week. We've got finals football in the Super League starting.
Indeed.
So we've got so much to get into.
A lot to talk about.
Oh, yeah, and episode 10 too, double digits.
Yes, absolutely. We're getting old.
Oh, that's right. The episodes are flying by.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll kick it off. Right off the bat, we'll get into some of the games that we saw last Friday night. The televised game, a lot of controversy surrounding this one between the Leigh Leopards and Wigan Warriors. What did you make of this performance?
Well, it was a great game, very, very well contested, and particularly when you bear in mind that Leigh were missing John Asiata, who's probably been he's their captain, and he's probably been their main player this year, certainly in a creative sense. So Leigh did extremely well, but they were incredibly unlucky because you'll have seen that there was a massive controversy about the try that Oliver Gildart scored, but which was disallowed by the video referee. And quite frankly, I thought the decision was an absolutely ludicrous one. It was a decision to disallow the try because of an obstruction. But I'm afraid that to me, it was Bevan French who was supposedly being obstructed from moving across to get within tackling range. But if you watch it very carefully, you'll see that there was, the player coming through went right to his inside shoulder and didn't interfere with him in any way. As far as I could see, unless my eyes really do need testing again, which is not altogether impossible, but it just looked crazy to me. And for that try to be disallowed, Leigh fans and the Leigh owner, Derek Beaumont, of course, blew up about it and got himself into a bit of trouble, you might say, with a speech he gave, at the club after the game, which has now become public. It's gone a bit viral, and he makes a lot of he's clearly deeply upset and made some pretty outrageous comments afterwards. But when you see decisions that so crucially affect the outcome of a game, I think it's very disappointing when they get it wrong. And people are saying, we're going to have video referees at every game next year. Well, we need them to be a bit smarter than they were last Friday night. And the thing is, if that try had stood, Leigh would have gone to 10-all. And there's a very good chance that Ben Reynolds might have kicked the conversion. So that would have made it 12-10 to Leigh. Now, nobody knows whether they would have gone on to win the game. They might have done, or they might not. But the fact is that by having the try disallowed, it meant that they didn't go on to win. And it affects them very badly because Hull Kingston Rovers, they had a very, very good win against Wakefield and overtook Leigh in the table. So Hull KR will now host Leigh rather than the other way around in the playoffs this weekend. And it also affected St Helens because if Wigan had lost that game, they would have dropped to third place and St Helens would have gone up to second place. And that would have meant that St Helens would have had a free weekend this weekend. But as it now is, they've got to play Warrington. Who they, may well beat. But, if I were, there are quite a lot of teams whose position in the top six was affected by that decision in a not very indirect way.
And I think with, especially for the Saints, like they've got a few, they've had a lot of injuries this year alone. I'm sure they would have appreciated having that week off.
I'm sure they would.
Now, you did touch on Derek Beaumont's comments after the match. Obviously, that's quite a raw and emotional time for him to be speaking after a controversial loss.
I mean, Derek is somebody who does speak out, and sometimes I think he says things emotionally, where he's guided by emotion rather than logic, probably. But, rugby league's an emotional game, isn't it? And, it wasn't just him who was upset. Obviously, Adrian Lamb was devastated as well, as were all the Leigh team and, quite frankly, all the Leigh supporters. It was extremely disappointing for them, and I just think we've got to do a bit better, really. Part of the problem is this idea that the referee goes to the video referee saying, hands across my chest, I didn't think it was a try because of obstruction. What it would be better to do, really, would be for the referee to say, I'm not sure whether it was a try or not. Have a look at it and see what you think, video referee. You make the decision, not based on what I think, but based on what you think. And I have a funny feeling, because Marcus Griffiths, who was the video referee, said, well, there isn't enough evidence to overturn the referee's decision. And I thought there was, clearly. But if the referee hadn't made a decision and had simply referred it up without a decision, I suspect that Marcus Griffiths would probably then have said, OK, it stands as a try. This idea that you're looking for evidence to overturn what the referee on the field has said, sometimes looks ridiculous to me, and I thought it did in that case. Yeah,
I was actually watching this match at the Sportsman's Bar down in Mallorca, which is an English pub, and all the fans that were there watching the rugby league match were all up in arms about that decision.
Well,
rightly so.
So you did see it.
Yeah.
And what did you think of it?
Oh, I thought it was a try for sure. I've seen much worse obstruction offences happen, and been awarded. So,
absolutely.
I thought for sure when they took it upstairs, because in the pub itself you couldn't really hear the audio and the commentary of the game, but I got nervous as more replays got shown.
Yeah,
and I thought they're not going to give this try.
I know, and it was so obvious. So, how many rugby league fans were in the pub with you?
I think there was around me. I think there was at least 7 or 8.
Good.
There was a few couples there. So obviously enjoying their holiday down there, but it was a great little pub, and they had it on a few screens, which was nice.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
But there's been, I was reading a few comments online as well. There's been a few theories thrown out there. Obviously, the shield was there to hand to
conspiracy theories. Yeah, they
right.
inevitably will tend to flow.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a great believer in conspiracy theories, but the trouble is when you get decisions that look illogical, then that's when that gives rise to conspiracy theories, doesn't it? So, unfortunately, and rugby league fans, like most other people, are always up for a good conspiracy theory.
Yeah,
I mean, my dad thought that every referee was biased against Wakefield Trinity. It didn't just think it; he knew it.
Yeah.
And nothing could persuade him otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure Willie Peters is thanking the referees they made that decision, given they get the home advantage this weekend.
I think Leigh will be pretty highly motivated though this week. I think they'll go with a bit of a chip on their shoulder to Hull KR, and it'll be a really great game. I don't know who's going to win it, but my goodness, it will be a good game.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder for all of our viewers and listeners, if you do want to read Martin's column in this week's edition of the League Express newspaper, you can head along to www.totalrl.com/shop to secure your subscription. I believe the new edition of the Rugby League World magazine for the month of October is
just
now
coming
live
out. Yeah,
on the
it's
website.
Just coming out, indeed.
So grab yourselves a copy of that.
Yeah.
But moving on, the other game we had, or another match we had, was the Catalans Dragons 19 defeated Salford 8, which sees Salford bow out of finals contention.
Yes, I mean, I'd actually been hoping that Salford would make the 6, because I think they're such an entertaining team to watch. But it wasn't their year this year, and Warrington were the team that managed to get there, and of course they'll now play St Helens this Saturday in a game that will be televised both by Sky and by Channel 4. So that's going to be quite an interesting one.
Interesting. Yeah, great. It'll be interesting. We can maybe sit there and compare the products and say who's better at televising the game when it's all said and done. We also had the Saints 30 defeated Hull FC 12. Probably no surprises here. Saints solid as always heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, and of course it's the beginning of the swan song for James Roby and Louis McCarthy-Scarsbrook, two 37-year-olds who have been incredible stalwarts for St Helens. James Roby's the captain. I've just been speaking to James a bit earlier today, and it would mean such a lot to him to, win the title again for a fifth successive time. I mean, he was appointed the captain in 2018, so this is the sixth season that he's been the captain. And for, 5 of those, if you include this year, if they win it, he will have captained them to Grand Final victory, which would be an amazing achievement, wouldn't it, really?
Absolutely right. And I believe this will be their last home game out at St Helens this week, and they won't have a chance to play back at home for the remainder of the season.
No, because if they win, as you would imagine they would do, they'll be at Catalans in round 2, and then, of course, round 3 is the Grand Final on October the 14th. So, yes, this is the last time, Saints fans, if you're watching, and I'm sure you are, get along to the Totally Wicked Stadium to see a guy who's been an absolute legend for your club and for rugby league generally. I think, James Roby, if ever there was a rugby league player who deserved a knighthood, I think James falls into that category. He's
absolutely
been such a great servant to the game. I'll tell you one thing that's quite interesting that for you, will be quite an odd thing in a way. As an Australian, in the NRL you don't have squad numbers. You don't play with squad numbers. In Super League we do play with squad numbers, and the number 9 shirt for St Helens in 28 years has only ever been worn by 2 players. It's the most amazing statistic. It was worn for 15 years by the great Kieran Cunningham, from 1996 to to 2010, and James Roby inherited that shirt in 2011 and has worn it right through to 2023. There's no other squad number for any club in the Super League that's only been worn by 2 players, and it's just I think it's something that St Helens ought to really make a big thing of.
Absolutely. No, that's crazy to think of, because obviously those 2 have been so dominant over their years, and I guess it's going to be odd for Saints fans to see potentially Darryl Clark or someone like that wearing that. Well, he's probably going to get
the number 9 shirt, you would imagine, wouldn't you? Yeah, you would certainly imagine. And the interesting thing is that this Saturday, Darryl Clark will be facing James Roby, in that game between Saints and Warrington. So I was just saying to James, it'd be ironic, wouldn't it, if Darryl led the Warrington team to victory at St Helens this Saturday. I'm not quite sure how the Saints fans would react. I don't think they'd be all that pleased.
Yeah.
But, at least they're going to be getting him next year.
They'd be saying start him round 1 on the bench, maybe.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome, and best of luck to James Roby. I'm sure it'll be a great atmosphere at Totally Wicked Stadium.
12:45 kickoff on Saturday.
Yeah, is it always a midday kickoff, or is that something?
It is when it's shown by Channel 4.
Channel 4, yeah.
They seem to go for kickoffs at 1 o'clock or thereabouts, and it just fits in with their schedules. And I don't think it's bad for rugby league. To watch a game at that time, I think's, great fun, because you can, go out afterwards and do something else, can't you? Or even go to an amateur game or something if that's what you want to do after having watched a game on TV. So, great stuff from that point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. It leaves you a full afternoon free, that's for sure. Moving on, we also had the Kingston Rovers 56 defeated Trinity 12. Unfortunate way for Wakefield's season and I guess standing in Super League to go out.
But the more important news for Wakefield is that they've now confirmed that the club has been taken over by a new owner. And Matthew Ellis is the guy's name, who's quite a wealthy guy who's in the kitchen business. So I think that's going to be quite important for Wakefield, and hopefully he's going to really do a great job. And he's already said that he's obviously looking to get them back into Super League, and not just on a short-term basis, but improving the club to the extent that it can get a Grade A licence under these new IMG proposals. So, it would be great for the club if he could do that, and let's hope that's going to be achieved further down the line.
And while we're on the topic, I was going to say it for the news, but Darryl Powell, he's been linked with Wakefield.
Yes,
training.
he's going to be the new coach. Nobody's quite sure, I don't think, at the moment what's happening with Mark Applegarth, but I hope that Mark stays on with the club, because Mark is a Wakefield man through and through. I mean, he inherited the coaching job at the start of the season, and I mean, it was inheriting a poison chalice, really, because Wakefield went into the season, under-resourced, really, in terms of playing personnel, I think. Certainly, they weren't spending up to the full salary cap figure, and when you don't do that, you're battling against, adversity, I'm afraid. But Mark is such a likeable guy, but also, I mean, it's not just that he's a likeable guy. If that were his only quality, he wouldn't be a good coach. But I actually think he's done a wonderful job over the years with some of the younger players at Wakefield, and I don't think the club can afford to really let him go.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you said he's Wakefield through and through, they're the players or the coaches that you want around the club to sort of steer that new direction or to shape that culture going forward. We also had Warrington 20 defeated Giants 8. A good win for the Wolves, which sees them secure the final playoff seed heading into the finals.
I think Warrington, it's been such a strange season for them, hasn't it? That brilliant start, 8 wins in a row. Then they had a series where they went 8 wins or 8 games without a win. But they recovered just in time to retain their place in the top 6, and now they play St Helens on Saturday. So, but unfortunately, they're going to be without Paul Vaughan. And again, I had a bit of a go in League Express this week at the RFL disciplinary panel, who I think, really just made some foolish points about that supposed, picking up Sione Matautia, who was supposedly lying injured on the floor when he was doing no such thing. I mean, it was Sione Matautia in that game. 2 minutes to go, St Helens leading by 6 points. Matautia gets tackled, and like any player in that situation, tries to get up to play the ball as slowly as possible. Not being injured, everybody knew he wasn't injured, including Vaughan. And Vaughan, foolishly really, just reached out and tugged on his shirt to get him up a bit more quickly. If anything, it was a minor offence worthy of a fine, perhaps, but certainly no suspension. And to suspend him for 4 matches for doing that, I thought was ridiculous, personally. And nobody will persuade me otherwise. I mean, the idea that only a doctor could have realised that Matautia wasn't injured is just ridiculous. And as somebody wrote quite a good letter into League Express this week, one of our readers, saying if you're gonna suspend people for 4 games for doing something that could be a bit dangerous in a rugby league game, then stop playing rugby league, because just tackling somebody is a bit dangerous potentially. There's the potential for injury in rugby league in every tackle, and if you're going to be so pedantically careful about the game, then you can't play it, really. You've got to accept that to some degree there is danger in rugby league. Hopefully, players never get seriously injured. But that was just a ludicrous situation for me. It's
almost like the RFL has just drawn a line in the sand, but you have to ask the question, when does common sense come into play?
Well, exactly. You can't be absolutely legalistic about this sort of thing, and it's happened now, and Warrington were obviously very unhappy as well about the situation, and my advice to them was to take it to the courts, but obviously they've not done that. But oh gosh, it will be sad, because Vaughan will, if Warrington get to the grand final, Vaughan will miss all the playoff games, including the grand final. I mean, obviously him not being in the side makes their job a lot harder at at St Helens on Saturday, but it would have been great to see him in the side.
Absolutely, and if they do happen to get to the grand final, or if they don't happen to make it to the grand final, rather, it still puts them at a disadvantage at the start of next season as well.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I think common sense has to prevail, but this is what we're dealt with. But moving on, we had Leeds 46, defeated Tigers 0. I guess the Leeds fans will be cheering they were able to finish on a high note.
I tell you what was interesting about that. There were more than 15,000 people there, when Leeds have had some shocking results recently. And it just sort of shows how faithful the Leeds fans are. If only every club had such faithful supporters. And Leeds at last rewarded their fans with a great performance, although Castleford were a disaster. At this moment in time, it's Wednesday afternoon. We've not yet heard from Castleford whether they've appointed Danny Ward as their new coach. I hope they do, but you never know. It's their decision, and we'll just have to wait and see. Hopefully, that will be either confirmed or not in the next 24 hours, perhaps, or a bit longer. But they need to start planning for next year, and they need to start planning how they're not going to have such a poor season next year as they've had this year.
And it'll be a huge benefit to the club if Danny does get that opportunity to have a full off-season to prepare ahead of next year.
Yeah. I think that's what he needs, and that's what they need. And, they need to start reducing the age profile of the players a bit, and I think they are starting to do that. So, and we also need to know, are they going to sign Blake Austin, for example, to a 2-year contract, because obviously that's what he's after. Yeah. But nobody seems to be quite sure what's happening there either, do they? So there's a lot of unanswered questions about Castleford at the moment.
That's right, and I think someone like Blake, a veteran, it'd be a huge benefit to have someone like him remain around the club.
You would think so, wouldn't you? Yeah.
But yes, and so that wraps up our Super League games. Obviously, we've got the finals coming up this weekend. We'll get into those a little bit later, but we also had the NRL preliminary finals go down over the weekend. Panthers 38 defeated Storm 4, a very strong showing from Penrith.
Oh, Penrith are just such a strong side, aren't they? They are, and I thought they'd win this game easily. If I'm honest about it, they're just a machine, really. I mean, a lot of people. It's fascinating, isn't it? In Australia, in Sydney in particular, the Panthers are not a popular side with non-Panthers supporters, because I think, quite frankly, jealousy creeps in, doesn't it? A lot of people see the Panthers and wish that their side could be as successful, but they're not. And the Panthers just keep rolling on. They're, like St Helens, this is their 4th successive grand final, and it will be the 3rd successive win if they win it. And they were just far too good for Melbourne.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think in Australia, the tall poppy syndrome seems to take over when there's a team on top, and everyone likes to try and tear them down. But yeah, a great showing. Obviously, Jerome Luai returned. It was interesting to see how well he got through that game. I thought,
he's a great player. Yeah, great player, and he's another guy heading for $1 million contract, isn't he? I think they obviously want to hang on to him, and they probably will do, but it'll be $1 million a year proposition for him. And the other game, of course, a very strong win for the Broncos against the Warriors. I thought that was a really great game to watch, by the way. Did you see that one?
Yeah. I unfortunately, I think we were driving at the time, but I did get to rewatch it once we got back to the hotel. But yeah, a great performance. It was sort of marred in controversy with that Reece Walsh forward pass. I know a lot of Warriors fans were disappointed with that, but I mean, when a team puts 42 points on you, I don't think you can really blame.
Well, that's the difference, isn't it? Because if we go back to that Leigh v Wigan game, missing a key element in the game as a referee or video referee, if there are only 4 points in the game, it becomes very important. If the margin is, 30 points, 42-12, it becomes less important, doesn't it? Because you can't say that it was that led to the final result. It was much more convincing than that. So, no, but it would be good if forward passes were spotted, wouldn't it?
Yeah. That was probably one of the worst I've seen. And I do sympathise with the Warriors fans because, as you know, rugby league, it's a game of momentum, and you could argue that from that point in the game, the Warriors lost the opportunity to wrestle back the momentum.
Yes, yeah, but it's been a great season for the Warriors, and it's been a great season for New Zealand Rugby League, really. And of course, we've still got the Pacific Championship to come when New Zealand will play Australia. But it's been a great season for them. That Rugby League in New Zealand has made great strides. In comparison to other sports there. The whole country got behind the Warriors, didn't they? And I just hope that progress is continued and that the Warriors can become a super club that qualifies for the playoffs every year, because there's no guarantee that they will do, of course. It's been a great year for Andrew Webster this year. He's the Dally M Coach of the Year in Australia, just been announced almost as we speak. But you've got to bear in mind that, that's no guarantee that they're going to be in the top 2 or 3 next year. So, every new season is a blank sheet of paper.
And it's amazing. Like we've touched on it a few weeks in a row now, but just to think that in such a short span, how much the game has grown in New Zealand. Like we're talking in the midst of the All Blacks competing in the World Cup, all the focus in New Zealand seemed to be on the Warriors and how they were going.
Yes, that's right. Because of course in the Rugby Union World Cup, the All Blacks they did play the opening game against France, but apart from that, most of their opponents are teams that they'll have fairly easy wins against. So there's not much drama until they get to the quarterfinals. But the Warriors were having drama every week, weren't they? And that's the key thing. If you can create that sort of drama on the field, and there were drawing capacity crowds, it was what a tremendous degree of excitement there was there. And I've said actually, the NRL has got to, in the long term, be planning for a second New Zealand club, ideally in the South Island in Christchurch, in my view, where there's a brand new stadium currently being built, and it would be ideal to see a second NRL club there. But I'd like to see the NRL persuading NRL clubs to take home games to various venues in New Zealand, various cities, Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin, various other places, to capitalise on this growth of interest. Because it was interesting that when West Tigers took their home game to Hamilton earlier this year, they got a full house for that game to see the Warriors. And obviously, if you're playing the Warriors, at venues throughout New Zealand, people will turn up to watch them. There's no doubt. And
those games do tend to sell, like you've seen it. Teams like the Souths have taken a few of their games up into Queensland territory,
That's
gone
right.
to the Sunshine Coast. We've seen
and they've taken
Darwin,
a few games to Perth as well, of course.
That's right. So,
which is another contender for an NRL franchise, isn't it?
No, absolutely. They're very blessed, fortunate with the position the NRL finds himself in at the moment. I will say, I think all year long, though, I think we've got the 2 right teams in the grand final. It's always seemed like Penrith and Broncos have just been a cut above the rest in what's been a really tightly contested competition. What do you think?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. You look at Nathan Cleary versus Adam Reynolds at halfback. What a great battle that is. I think Adam Reynolds has been fantastic. The enormous mistake that South Sydney made in letting Adam Reynolds leave to go to Brisbane. But you've got you've got Reece Walsh, who, the bigger the stage, the better he seems to play. And if the Broncos are going to win on Sunday, then he will need to have a really great game, I think. And there's so much to really look forward to in that game, isn't there? It's going to be quite amazing, really.
Oh, absolutely. And we might touch on it a little bit later, but we do have some news to get to. Kalyn Ponga has just been announced as the Dally M Player of the Year for the NRL. Obviously, going into it, I think a lot of people had Shaun Johnson as the favourite.
Yeah, I think Shaun Johnson came second in the end, didn't he? Kalyn Ponga has been great for Newcastle. And Newcastle got into the top 8, the top 6, actually. And it was, he had an awful lot to do with that, didn't he? Let's face it. As did Dom Young, of course, the English winger. But, Kalyn Ponga, Shaun Johnson, they're both great players, aren't they? And, Kalyn is a fabulous player. He incidentally must be one of the greatest all-round sportsmen to ever play rugby league because, as you may know, when he was a kid, he was the under-13 golf champion in New Zealand. And before, when he came into rugby league, I think he also had offers to play rugby union, football and AFL professionally. He could play every damn thing.
Yeah. And,
it's a great blessing that he chose rugby league. So what a great player and what an incredible sportsman. And, who can say that he doesn't deserve that particular medal?
No, absolutely right. It's you just look at players like that or people like that in general and you think, if only I could have half the amount of talent you had, I'd be flying, But we also had news, Herbie Farnworth. We've got to shout out the Englishman. He was named one of the centre positions in the Dally M Team of the Year.
Absolutely.
It's been a great year for Herbie,
and he's going to the Dolphins next year. They're what a great signing he's going to be.
Absolutely. And we hope to see him in some fine form when Tonga come over and tour here in a couple of months' time. Now, looking at other news, we've touched on the Derek Beaumont post-match stuff. We've also had some contenders over here for Coach of the Year announced. We've had 4 candidates, and of those 4 named, it was Paul Roldy, Matty Pete, Adrian Lamb, and Steve McNamara. Now, some people have been saying Willie Peters should have been among those candidates.
I would have said Willie Peters should have been, yeah. I think he's done a fantastic job at Hull KR. But, obviously you've got to name some people and some people don't make a short list. But of those mentioned, I think it's really between Matty Pete and Adrian Lamb, isn't it? Matty Pete, they're the 2 guys who have won trophies so far this year. Adrian Lamb obviously winning the Challenge Cup and Matty Pete winning the League Leaders' Shield. So I think Matty Pete's done a wonderful job at Wigan, but Adrian's done a great job at Leigh. So, I'd be happy with either of those 2 guys.
And no Paul Wellens either?
No, Paul Wellens. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Winning the World Club Challenge doesn't get you a nomination as Coach of the Year. That's a bit surprising, to say the least.
Yeah, and especially, they won against that Penrith team that's playing in the Grand
absolutely,
Final again.
Yeah.
So a bit surprised he didn't make the cut, but like you said, you can only pick 4, and I agree with you. I think Matty Pete, he could get it. Adrian Lamb as well. But yeah, we'll see. We've also had news lately that Tarek Sims, who's currently playing for the Storm, he'll sign with Catalan's Dragons, play next year and the year after. What do you make of this signing?
How old is Tarek Sims?
He would be
about 32?
32, 33.
Well, hopefully he's still got a lot left in the tank. I mean, I've admired Tarek Sims for a long time. I think he's a really fine player. Lots of, he's quite an aggressive player, and I think he's the sort of guy that that they probably need. He's the brother of Ashton Sims, isn't he? Who was a bit older, who played for Warrington, of course, and was a real great guy. Real rugby league guy through and through. And if Tarek is anything like him, then he'll be a great signing for the Catalans. I'm quite sure. In fact, the Sims are a real rugby league family because Corbyn was at Hull KR, wasn't he?
Yeah. He also played for the Broncos and the Knights, and then you also have Ruan Sims.
Ruan Sims, who was a great female player. Yeah.
One of the best.
She's one of the female commentators now, isn't she? I think.
Yeah, and I really like her commentary. I think she's
really smart. Good. Yeah, so do
I. In other player signing news, I think, again, Cooper Johns has been linked with Hull FC. It's reported that he's going to sign with them. He's someone who's played with Manly this season. He's had a few years there in the Storm system, comes from a great rugby league family.
Absolutely, yeah.
So someone who could potentially fill that Jake Clifford void.
Certainly has a great name anyway. That's, if that's part of it. But, of course, he's got to be his own man. He can't just live off his name. And, hopefully he'll add something to Hull FC. I mean, it's interesting now that it's very difficult for English clubs to sign NRL players who are right at the top of their game in the NRL. Because the difference in the financial capability of English clubs compared to NRL clubs is really quite stark. So I'm afraid the days when teams could sign Mal Meninga when he was the best player in the world, or Wally Lewis, or whoever it might be, are far behind us, I'm afraid. So we've just got to make the best of what we can, I think.
No, absolutely right. And it's funny you mentioned Malmaningo, because when I was at that pub in Mallorca, there must have been Saints fans, because they had a few photos. It was sort of like artwork of players that had played, and they had a painting of Malmaninga from his year with
on the wall in the pub.
Yeah,
oh,
I
really?
took a photo of it, so I'll have to put that up, or I'll show you after the episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was surprised. I was walking to the restroom, and I sort of looked up, and thought, "Oh, that's Malmaninga," and no, it's
great.
pretty cool to see. You wouldn't think you would see it in Spain, of all places.
No, that's amazing.
Now, there's been a bit of news this week. There's 3 Wigan players that are set to be free to play in their semi-final matchup due to a loophole, allowing them to serve for a championship side or the reserve grade side.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the reserve grade grand final this weekend.
Right.
I think we're going to play in St Helens.
Yeah.
And these players can serve their suspension because this game's taking place. I mean, have you ever heard anything so ridiculous?
No, that's just bizarre.
It is.
I don't think you can do it in the NRL. I can't remember.
No, I don't think you can. And this has got to be looked at. I mean, no blame on Wigan for taking advantage of that situation. You know, that's their prerogative to do that, and obviously they've done it. And you know, I would have done the same thing in their position. But that doesn't mean to say that it's the right principle. I mean, the only thing you can say is, if you sort of expand on that a bit, that Wigan have earned the right to a free weekend this weekend because of finishing in the top 2. So, you know, if they'd finished third, as they might have done, obviously, if they'd not beaten Leigh, then they would have had a game, and those players would have been playing in that game, you know, whoever it might have been against, if it might have been against Warrington, for example. So, you know, you can say that maybe when a team has a free weekend because it's achieved a certain place in the table, then that weekend perhaps should be allowed to count. Or that's a bit of a stretch, isn't it? But really, it's an odd one. I've always thought it's a strange thing to allow players to serve a suspension for a team that they wouldn't be playing in anyway.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I guess we've also had the championship sort of finalised over the weekend. How did that relegation battle end up? Was it the Cougars?
Keighley Cougars go down.
Yes.
On the most marginal points difference imaginable. Both they and Whitehaven finished with 16 points, but Keighley's points difference was 331 minus, and Whitehaven's was 328.
Wow.
So just 3 points in it, and they go down, and that's such a massive disappointment, really, for them, because they're such a progressive club, really, and you know, it would have been great to see them staying up, but they go down. Newcastle Thunder, of course, they were already down, and it's Dewsbury and Doncaster who will replace them in the championship. Doncaster won the League One promotion game at the weekend and beat North Wales Crusaders and secured a place in the championship. And it's good to see Doncaster doing that. Doncaster's it's a city nowadays. It was reclassified as a city 2 or 3 years ago, and it's in South Yorkshire, which is a bit of an expansion area for rugby league in a way. And I'd very much like to see them doing well. They'll have a South Yorkshire derby against Sheffield Eagles next year, and it's going to be quite interesting, I think, to see how that goes. But I'll just point out one thing about the championship as well. We've got 6 teams who are going to be playing in the championship playoff. We've got Toulouse, Bradford, Sheffield, London and York. 5 major cities, 5 really big cities, alongside Featherstone, which is a very small town of about 15,000 people.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's really strange, isn't it, that the big city clubs in rugby league are all in the championship, not for the most part, in Super League. If you look at the Super League playoffs, the only cities represented there, you've got Catalans representing the city of Perpignan in France, and Hull Kingston Rovers representing the city of Hull. Yeah. But on the other hand, Wigan, St Helens, Leigh and Warrington are not cities. They've only got town status. So it's sort of odd, isn't it, that that rugby league has that sort of characteristic of big cities in the championship, as well as them. There's Newcastle Thunder, of course, which is a pretty big city too, which no doubt you might visit one day while you're over here.
No, absolutely. I was going to ask you, with the standings aside and performances aside, if you could pick any of the championship sides to be promoted for the benefit of the game, which team do you think you would like to see promoted?
Well, that's a really interesting one, because when you ask me that, I'm bound to upset 5 clubs here, aren't I? Because obviously every fan of every club will think it should be their club that goes up. Obviously Featherstone, really, they've been there or thereabouts for so long now. They're a club based in the Metropolitan District of Wakefield, and if they replace Wakefield, it just means that the Metropolitan District of Wakefield still has 2 clubs in Super League. Yep. But I'm also a great believer in Toulouse. I really think we need a second French team in Super League, and Toulouse is such a great city, and they've got so much potential over there, so that would be great. But I'm sympathetic to all the clubs. I also would like to see London Broncos doing well. I think we need a big presence in London, and they play at the Cherry Red Records Stadium now in Wimbledon with Wimbledon Football Club, and I'd love to see them doing well and improving their crowds, and really getting some London people behind them. I really think it's a shame that IMG, who have said that they, the game really needs a big club in London, but IMG, as far as I can tell, have not done much so far to help London make any progress, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It'll be exciting. A few weeks to come, we'll see that promotion battle sort of unfold.
Well, we certainly will this weekend. It's a great weekend. It's Bradford versus York and Sheffield Eagles versus London at in the opening weekend of the Championship playoffs, and those games will be worth watching, believe me.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to this weekend, the 2 matchups in the Super League. Who do you favour in either of these clashes?
Well, you've got to favour Saints against Warrington for fairly obvious reasons, not least being that Paul Vaughan won't be playing for Warrington. And then the other game, Hull KR and Leigh, that's a much more difficult game to call, I think, because the last time they played was a few weeks ago, not long after the Challenge Cup final, when Leigh travelled to Hull KR and got quite a lot of points put on them. And I think that was getting Wembley out of their system, really, and Hull KR being eager to gain revenge for that Wembley defeat. I'm sure it'll be a lot closer this week, and I think I'd marginally favour Hull KR, but I wouldn't be in the slightest bit surprised if Leigh were to win it. And, it's going to be fascinating to see how it goes.
Absolutely. And in the NRLW Grand Final, we've got the Knights taking on the Titans, which will be a great
Georgia Roach, the English girl, playing at 5/8 for Newcastle Knights. Absolutely. 5-year contract she signed at the start of the season. And, of course, Newcastle Knights are the holders, aren't they? They won it last year. The Gold Coast Titans, their women's side have got to a grand final before the men's side has managed to do that. So that's, great for them. I think the NRLW has been a fantastic success story for rugby league in Australia this year. 10 teams. People said it expanded too rapidly. The standard might go down, but that clearly hasn't been evident. And at the weekend, Newcastle played their semi-final game at McDonald Jones Stadium in a standalone game against Brisbane Broncos, and they got 12,689 people watching. That my gosh, that says a lot, doesn't it? What a great thing for women's rugby league, for women's sport, and what a lot it says about the people of Newcastle that they were going to come out and watch their team, in those numbers, and absolutely fabulous. And hopefully a lot of those fans will travel down the highway to get to Accor Stadium to watch them in the grand final.
Absolutely. I just wish that fans in the heart of Sydney could replicate that attendance. You could argue that the stadiums are much different sizes and capacity, but I think when we saw so many empty seats in that Storm vs Panthers match compared to the Broncos vs Warriors, it was a bit disheartening to see. But
35,000 was the crowd, wasn't it, at the Penrith Storm game, which probably wasn't an unexpected attendance. But if that had been played at the Alliance Stadium, it would have almost filled it, wouldn't it? And it would have looked a lot better. I think the Olympic Stadium is a graveyard for rugby league, really. Personally, I wish they'd knock it down and, build. I was very keen on this idea that Peter Vlandis had of spending a lot of money getting a lot of suburban stadiums really up to scratch, improving all of them. Because the thing about the NRL, if you look at the stadiums in the NRL, all the stadiums in Queensland are fantastic, aren't they? Where games are played. The three main ones, obviously Suncorp Seabus Super Stadium on the Gold Coast, and Queensland Country Bank Stadium in Townsville. And of course in Sydney they've now got Alliance Stadium, which is a massive improvement on what it used to be, and Combank Stadium where Parramatta play. But there are still quite a lot of other stadiums that fall below what should be an acceptable standard. There are quite a lot of people in Australia who claim that the government shouldn't spend money on stadiums, but the government owns those stadiums. So if they don't spend money, who will? And it's not just rugby league that's played in most of those venues. Those stadiums are available for a range of different sports. And it's about time they were all made better. And similarly in Canberra, the Canberra Stadium, I think, is below the quality that it should have. And I also think, even Mount Smart Stadium, which is very atmospheric, but it still could be a much better, they still need a modern stadium, in my view, in Auckland. Yeah, no, absolutely right. And I've also just remembered, while we're on the Knights and Titans, Tamika Upton, she was awarded the Dahlia Medal for the women's game. Incredible pace, hasn't she, from full back? Fantastic. What a to have her chiming into the attack is she's very long-legged, got a very long-legged style of running, but my God, she's effective. She's a really great player. She kind of reminds me of like the way Justin Hodges used to run. It didn't look like he was going too fast, but he was always quick. I don't know. It must just be the long strides. But yeah, she is quick when she's in it, out in the open. That's for sure. Absolutely. We'll also see the interstate Cup Grand Final matchup between East Tigers and South Sydney Rabbitohs. They won the New South Wales Cup over the weekend, and a try to Tyrone Munro on the wing in the dying sort of minutes of that match. So, who's played a lot of first grade football this year for the Souths as well. So that's going to be a great matchup. But it'll all build up for the Broncos Panthers Grand Final Sunday morning for us. Who do you like in this matchup, Martin? It's very hard to look beyond the Panthers, isn't it, really? I'd love to see Brisbane win it, I've got to say, because I'm just a fan of the way they play the game. And, of course, they've got Herbie Farnworth there, who's an Englishman who I'd like to see winning a trophy. But if I'm really honest about it, I've got to go with the Penrith Panthers. I just think they're such a accomplished team in everything that they do. I think Nathan Cleary is a candidate for being regarded as the best player in the world. His kicking game is absolutely incredible, and his management of their team around the pitch is just absolutely astonishing in my view. And but you never know. I'm by no means infallible when it comes to making predictions, Jake. So, obviously you're a Broncos man, aren't you? So hopefully by this time next week we'll be sitting here celebrating your team having won. Oh, fingers crossed. It's going to be, a lot of people are tipping this to be, one of the all-time grand finals to go down, and a lot of people are hyping up the match in the middle. Obviously, we've got Paddy Carrigan, Payne Haas and Tom Flegler coming up against Moses Leota, James Fisher-Harris and Isaiah Yeo. So that I really like Isaiah Yeo as a player. I think he's a really good player, and he's the anchor for, in the middle of the field, whereas, Nathan Cleary is just the great playmaker. But a player like Isaiah Yeo, they're worth their weight in gold, in my view.
He is what makes that Penrith side so hard to stop when they're attacking the line, because when it goes from, the hooker, whether it's not Sonny Luke...
Mitch Kenny.
Mitch Kenny. When it goes from him to Isaiah Yeo, and then Isaiah Yeo either runs it himself or he'll hit James Fisher-Harris short, or then he'll go out the back to Nathan Cleary. So that's, one of three options they can take when he gets the ball in his hands. And then it's the same when it gets to Nathan Cleary. He can either hit his second rower short or go out the back to Dylan Edwards. So, you think about that straight off the hooker, that's 6 different options they could take when they're attacking the line.
Absolutely, yes.
And that's what makes them so hard to stop, because a lot of people say, well, the way you shut him down is by pressuring Nathan Cleary. But then if you pressure him, all Yo's got to do is dummy and go himself. You know what I mean?
And there's also a guy called Jerome Luai.
That's right.
You can't really shut him down, can you?
No. So I think if the Broncos are going to win, they have to play a perfect game. Reece Walsh has to have his touches, and Reynolds' kicking game has to be on point. But yeah, what a matchup it's going to be! I can't wait. I'm extremely nervous as a Broncos fan.
Yes. But it's the first time you've been in the Grand Final since 2015, is it? I think.
Yeah, first time.
And then you lost to the Cowboys.
Yeah, and that was a real heartbreaker. It
was a thrilling game, wasn't it?
They also say that's one of the best Grand Finals ever, but as a Broncos fan, one of the worst. But that year we saw Jonathan Thurston win his first premiership with the Cowboys, so that was, it made it a little bit sweeter, I guess.
Yes, of course.
But yeah, so it'll be an exciting weekend of football. Is there anything that you'd like to touch on, Martin, before we wrap up? Or?
I don't think so. No, we've just about covered everything. Just mentioned though, one thing we have had a shared Albert Goldthorpe medal this year with George Williams and Bevan French, both ending on 27 points, which is quite unusual for two players to come out at the top of the table like that. So
that hasn't happened before?
It has before, actually. Yes, it has before, but not since 2010, I think it was, when Sam Tompkins and Pat Richards won it jointly.
Yep.
It's great for them, and it's interesting to see whether one of those two players is the one that wins the Man of Steel award in the week leading up to the Grand Final.
No, that's awesome, and obviously both very much deserved. They've had 2 great seasons, and probably is hard to split the two of them.
Yes, well, I mean, at one point George Williams was walking away with it, but obviously that was when they were doing so well. He was the main man when they had that brilliant start to the season, but since then, obviously, it slowed down a bit, and we'll just have to see whether George can lead his team to victory this weekend.
Oh, absolutely. All right. Well, before we wrap it up, don't forget to go onto the Total RL website and subscribe to our League Express newspaper. You can go to www.totalrl.com/shop to secure your subscription. If you're watching this, feel free to hit the subscribe button on YouTube, and don't forget you can also listen to us in your headphones, in the car, wherever you're going, on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. We've been getting some comments under the YouTube videos. People are starting to have their say as well, which has been great.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're still listening, let us know who you think is going to win the NRL Grand Final this week, and I guess we'll come back next week and see how right or wrong we were.
You got it right, yes.
I might have to bring a box of tissues with me if we lose. I'll be celebrating if we win. But we might wrap it up here, Martin. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jake. It's been a pleasure.
No worries. Cheers.